Thank you, Hamid John. It's an honor to have you with us, and I know you have been very busy this week, including this morning. You had an important work engagement, so thanks so much for including us in your very busy schedule this week, and more importantly, your support and suggestions and advice through the last year. Behind the scene, I know you have been very passionate, supportive of our gathering today, so thank you for that. Really reading about you and knowing a little bit about you the last year, what has been very impressive for me is that how you are living such a multidimensional and rich life in so many aspects. You're not only very successful on the business ground, but also your presence in the academic scene, philanthropy causes, and industrial causes has all been very impressive. And I'm sure as a first-generation immigrant and Iranian in this country, it has not always been easy either. So I'm curious to learn about some of the challenges you face and also what you are most proud of today as your accomplishments.
Sure. Nargis John, thank you for that kind introduction, and everyone, it's great to be here with you, and it's one of my favorite places in the world, so it's easy always to say yes to Stanford. In terms of, this place, one of the reasons I love this place is because I was here during a very formative period in my maturity. Some people would argue, including my family members, that I haven't reached that stage of maturity, but I was here when I was 21, 22, and that was right in the middle of the Iranian Revolution. So in that sense, it was a really exciting time to be here because it was formative years, but it was also a very difficult time because when I came here in August of '78, September of '78, I really had a completely different picture about my future in front of me. And by the time I left in June of 1980, that whole picture had turned around 180 degrees like it had for many of us. So this was a period of dramatic change in terms of outlook and vision for my career. And I wish I could say that it was all really fun and wonderful, but it was also very difficult and jarring because not only Iran went through a transition at that time, but also it was a very dark time in this country. You may remember it was we were at the beginning, in 1980, we were in the beginning of what ended up being 2 recessions here. You had inflation running at 15% per year. You had the prime rate at 22%, and here I was, a young whippersnapper coming out of business school, thinking that I'm going to go into the real estate business, and it was probably the toughest period you could have started the real estate career. So it was kind of tough on a lot of different dimensions, and one of the early lessons that I learned, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about this, is that adversity is actually a really good thing, and gets you to do things that you never thought you were capable of doing. And so in that sense, I have very fond memories of my time here, but I also remember a lot of the stress associated with that transition at that time.
Very good. So where do you get that sense of inspiration and motivation in difficult times? And when you look back, what are you most proud of?
It's interesting. I think there are 2 things that drive me, and one is a fear of failure, which is not a good thing, and passion which is a good thing. So I would say over time, I'm getting more and more passionate about things, and less driven by fear of failure. But in those early days, fear of failure played a very important role because there was no safety net. And anybody who tells you otherwise, I think they're probably making up a pretty good story. I think it was a huge motivator. I'd much rather be driven by the passion about something, and there are lots of things I'm passionate about at this point in my life. And passion is about making choices, and choices are always exciting. So today, what I'm most passionate about in terms of my business is that we've now been able to create a company which is, pretty scaled, successful company globally. But we haven't created the company of enduring excellence yet. And many years ago, about 20, 25 years ago, I sat down with my partners and we said, okay, what's really important to us and what do we want to accomplish? And we wrote down, we all agreed, it took about a day and a half actually of discussion, heated discussion, but we talked about building something of enduring excellence. And if you really look around at a lot of businesses, you look at the list of the most successful companies in any industry, even technology, by the way, especially technology. you see companies that were very successful in the 80s weren't successful in the 90s, and the ones that were successful in the 90s are not on the list in the 2000s. I mean, there's a lot of creative destruction that goes on in a lot of different industries. And I maybe this is an impossible dream, but I would like our company, Prologis, to really live beyond and be considered an excellent company, way beyond its current leaders and maybe the next generation of leaders. So that will be a source of real pride professionally, because I think there are very few things in life that are anchors, that are always constants. We live in a very jarring world. Everything is changing all the time. There are very few magnetic norths. And I think, without getting overly dramatic about this, it's a company after all. To me, that's really important. And at this point in my career, that's what I work hardest for. And the key to that is developing the younger people that are in the organization. So I would say my focus has changed from growing the business to growing people and helping people grow. So, and I get a lot of jollies out of that. And by the way, one of the reasons I spend as much time as I do here is that you just run into amazing young people, and you can actually make a difference in their lives, and that's what I find really exciting.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing. This topic came up also in the conversation with Professor Hennessy around investing in the next generation of leaders globally and creating that excellence endurance. So what are the ways we can achieve it? Are there any methodology or methodical way of achieving that in your company?
Well, what we're really trying to do is try to turn the business more from a top-down structure and a top-down driven organization to more of a bottoms-up organization. And it's interesting that you ask about this, because as you mentioned, I just came from a 4-day meeting of our global leaders. Our top 120 people from around the world were in Santa Cruz, and I just spent the time on it. So this is very topical for me. So one of the things we do really well as a company is execute vertically. I mean, our people in the UK do a really great job of doing deals in the UK and building a business in the UK. We've divided up the company into small geographic tactical units that are very nimble, very fast, and entrepreneurial. The thing that's really tough about our business is how do you go against the grain? You've got the vertical geographies, those work really well. But if you try to drive change, that tends to be a horizontal activity. That's really hard to do. And if you try to do it from the top of the organization, it doesn't work. So you got to start from the base and try to go horizontal in the base. And it's about building a capacity. It's not about methodology, it's building about a capacity. It's about building a mindset of change. First of all, embracing change and not being afraid of change, because the first thing that happens when you try to drive horizontal change is that the organization just goes, digs its heels in, and because it affects people, it requires new learning, all kinds of things happen. So we're trying to force the change to happen more from the bottom up. And that may sound like an easy thing to do, but it's actually really difficult, particularly as you get larger and larger and more global, and you introduce new cultures into the place and all that. So that's a work in progress. I don't have a great answer for you, but it's something that we're working on passionately.
Thanks for sharing. I'm curious to learn, what was your personal journey in becoming a better leader? You talked about how you moved from the motivation out of fear to motivation out of passion. And also you talked about leading people besides leading business. What has been the turning point, those aha moments, or maybe lessons learned the hard way that changed you and developed you to be a better leader?
I would say that I can think of 3 things that have changed over time. I don't know if I'm a better leader, but I'm a different leader. So early in the career, it was all about being really analytical and getting to the right answer and all that. I would say I'm much more intuitive right now than before. So I'm using a different part of my brain. Part of that is that you start recognizing patterns. And experience is a really good substitute for analytical abilities, because you see many of the same patterns over and over again, and you get better at making judgments about them. But sometimes, by the way, you gotta stop yourself, because not all patterns require the same response. So it can get you in a little trap. But pattern recognition and intuition is an important change. I definitely was much less patient. I'm much more patient. Before it was all about trying to get to the right answer immediately. Now is letting people struggle with ambiguity for a while, because I think a lot of deep learning comes out of that ambiguity. This change from fear to passion was another transition that's happened. But it is also good for organizations at times to be fearful. I mean, Andy Grove, one of my heroes in business, wrote a book about 25 years ago, which I still think is one of the best business books ever written. And the title, I think, was Only the Paranoid Survive. If you look at a lot of companies that become very successful, people start believing their own BS, they think they're infallible, and that is exactly where the seeds of the next transition or disruption are sown. And I don't ever want us to become house cats. I want us to always be street cats and be always on the lookout for the next threat and the next opportunity.
Very good. I see a question come. I think audience is curious to learn about those patterns. You said that sometimes it's good to rely on intuition, sometimes not. And also examples, did you have any failures that you learned from?
The answer to the second question is yes. In fact, when I used to carry around a briefcase, until everybody told me that it's really old-fashioned to carry a briefcase, and now I have a backpack. But I used to carry around a yellow piece of paper, and this thing had been in my briefcase for so many years. It was all tattered and falling apart. But literally, I would write down all our messes, all our mess-ups, all our screw-ups, all the bad decisions. And frankly, it got to be too voluminous to be of any use, so I finally stopped carrying it. So I think anybody who doesn't make mistakes is not trying hard enough, and that's for sure. So believe me, we made plenty of mistakes, including some that were very significant and could have really changed the course of the company in a big way. But let me give you one of those learnings. I really believed in rehabilitation. Certain people, by the way, are the most important decisions. At the end of the day, if you mess up the people decisions, particularly decisions that go to the culture, it is very hard to recover from those, because the culture of the company, I think, is the DNA of the company. And if you mess that up, it's very hard to recover. And for example, I brought in a leader into the business that from very early days, it was pretty clear that this person did not share our culture and most importantly, all our values. So I spent the first 2 years actually defending this person because it was my decision. I kind of knew in my gut that it was the wrong decision, but God, I'm a leader, but he's looking up to me. I got to stick up for this guy, even though I'm hearing all kinds of problems with this. The next 2 years, I sort of backed away from that and allowed this person to run with a lot of responsibility, and literally they almost took our company down. And I had to go in and deal with the issue. So I'm not saying nobody can be rehabilitated, but if by the time you're in your 30s and 40s, your values are pretty set. And if it's not working out, it's not going to work out, and no degree of trying is going to really help it. It's better off for the person to go somewhere else, and it's better off for you to go a different direction. So I'm less in the rehabilitation business than trying to make sure that the fit is right from the very beginning, and you can't be perfect around that. So that's one important learning. Maybe obvious to all of you, but it took me a long time to figure that out.
I think the second question was around patterns. Are there different what are the patterns that you now quickly judge on them? Which ones are you more patient? That is the example of one of those parents. One other thing, I'll just throw it out there. We have, one of the important things we do in our company is we allocate capital. Every Monday, we sit down in an investment committee and we allocate capital. And just to give you a scale of the business, in an average year, we probably invest somewhere between $3 and $10 billion. Okay, so you divide it by 50 weeks, and you're making a couple $100 million decisions every Monday, and you basically do it. Okay, so one thing I've learned is that I got to go last.
because if I go first, the entire organization tries to figure out what I want to do and basically line up with that. So I don't hear the good ideas. So I've learned the hard way that keeping my mouth shut actually makes our organization a better organization because it pulls more people into it. So, I mean, there are lots and lots of examples of that I can take you through.
Thanks for sharing. There are questions about the Iranian Studies program at Stanford that you and your wife have really generously supported, and you're also a supporter of today's event through the Iranian Studies program. This is one of the important works you are doing besides the other activities you have at Stanford. So what has been the goal of it and how it is evolving over time?
Well, let me give you a little bit of history of this. I think this thing was an outgrowth of a series of lunches and dinners we were having I think it was in the early 2000s, and it was right where the nuclear issue was becoming kind of the centerpiece of all this. And really, the Iranian Studies program and the role that Tina and I played in it pales in comparison to what that guy over there has done about it. I mean, the reason is the reason this program, and I'm not targeting or anything, this is the truth. I think the reason this program is what it is because of Dr. Milani, and there's no question about that. Our vision was much more limited. Our vision was that there is a real lack of understanding about Iran. Most of the Iranian studies programs in the U.S. were originally set up to study the history of Iran and Achaemenian Empire and a lot of important things, but frankly not terribly relevant to what was going on today. So we wanted originally to set up a center of excellence for studying issues relating to public policy and relations with Iran and sort of the study of modern Iran. That was the original vision. I had no idea that we were in a short, we just had the 10th anniversary, celebrated the 10th anniversary of the program maybe 3 or 4 months ago, except I reminded that bus that it was 4 years late, and it was actually the 14th anniversary of the program. But it's now morphed into a very significant program in the arts, and thanks to Bita Daryabari, she really took that end of the program and ran with it, and I think it's, half the events or more are around arts and literature. I think we now have a little program in neuroscience, interestingly, and we have now a very successful program on Iran 2040, which is relating to economic and demographic issues that Puya is running with. So the program has expanded way beyond our original vision, and all of it has been because of the tireless efforts of Dr. Milani. So I'm very proud of the program, of all the things we've done at Stanford. That's the one that I'm most proud of because of him.
Very good, thank you. So what are your hopes and dreams for Iranian Stanford community? What do you think we can achieve together? And do you have ideas of how the Alumni Association and Student Association can be more active and involved both on campus and the larger society? You and I started talking about it, about a year ago, and you had very good advice for the team that was working on this idea around make sure it is grassroots. Many community efforts in this country started by a bunch of rich people, top down, is usually not sustainable. How can we make it grassroots and really driven by the community? And how much we should first invest inside our community before we can start giving to outside? And how we should continue to figure out what is that niche that we can create value for our community. So we took that by heart, and that is the result of it that you see today. But I think we are all interested to hear what are your thoughts and hopes for this community going forward.
Yeah, I would define success in terms of what we're trying to accomplish is when all of us as Iranians, Iranian Americans at various stages, however you want to define us, will cumulatively punch ahead of our combined weight. So if you take the individual contributions and reputations that Iranians have in this country, it's remarkable. When you bring us together as a community, usually the sum total of that is less than the component parts, because we don't play very nice together. And we don't. I mean, we're not really good team players, and there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians, and everybody wants to be boss and everybody wants to be leader. it's not a good thing. I would be very happy when we get to a point where we can have really respectful collaboration as a community. Now, Stanford is a great place to start that because this community is all about excellence. But I mean that with respect to everything, whether it's just Stanford or outside the Stanford. As a community, we punch under our potential. As individuals, we punch really well. But as a community, we're punching under our potential. We need to turn that around. And by the way, it's all of us in this room who can do that. And I see a lot of younger people there. I mean, this is your chance. I mean, we've kind of taken it to this level, but you really have the opportunity of doing this. I want this place to be a place where people want to acknowledge the fact that they're Iranian, and that part of their culture relates to Iran, and that they're really proud of it, as opposed to hiding. And with all the stuff that's going on in the environment and all that, it's really important, I think, because I think if we don't do it in this generation or the next, it'll become pretty irrelevant. I think it will get so diluted that it'll be hard to energize it.
I think
By the way, I think, if I may, I think we can do that. So I don't want to give anybody a pessimistic message about this at all. But I think it will take a different kind of approach. It will take the approach of checking our egos at the door. One of the things, by the way, about the Stanford board that I learned, there are a lot of high-powered people on that board. But when they get into that room, I don't care if it's a 32-year-old student, recent graduate, or a billionaire that's in that room. The dialogue is respectful. There is a lot of collegiality. Difficult issues are discussed and resolved, but everybody checks their ego at the door. And that's a really, really important thing. Successful organizations that I've seen always work that way.
Really an example to live up to. Thanks for sharing. I know you probably came to this country when people started to call themselves Persian instead of Iranians because of all the political challenges. Now, decades later, I don't know if it's easier or harder, but when you look at this situation and the special place that Iranians have when we go back home or when we are here, what do you think are ideas we should work on? Like, how can we come together to be a stronger community, but also as initiatives and projects to prioritize? Do you have suggestions for us?
Yeah, I think a great way of doing that is actually giving back to the broader community. I think anybody who has a relationship with any of you, your neighbors, your colleagues at work or whatever, by and large has a very favorable impression of their Iranian friends and all that. But, to be honest with you, when things have happened that are just wrong, we have not taken a really active role and spoken for our community, and we have not contributed back to this home, America, as much as we should have. And I think we need to be better known as people to give back to the broader community. We should give back to our own community, but we should also give more. And by giving back, I don't mean just money or anything like that. I mean time and resources. We got to get more engaged. We got to start running for school boards and getting, and by the way, I'm seeing more and more of this happening, so it's not like it's not happening, but I think that's where we're going to really move the needle in terms of making an impact on the communities that are maybe outside the direct Iranian American community.
Very nice. Thank you. So there are so many questions, and I'll switch from my questions to more of the questions from the audience. I think our audience is curious to learn about what's a day like in your life, and how do you balance all the demands of, you're motivated and passionate on so many causes, from, the philanthropy, academic, business, industry, and how do you balance that as well as your personal interest and family? Tell us about your day.
Well, there is no typical day. I mean, if you take a year, first of all, I don't sleep in my own bed 110 nights a year. So you run a global organization, you got to go spend time with your people. So I would say sort of the biggest demand on my time is travel, and that takes you away from family, and that takes you away from home, and it gets harder to do actually as you get older. So that's a big part of it. And then I find a lot of my life is programmed and scheduled, pre-scheduled ahead of time. So my day is a series of half an hour, hour-long chunks and chunks. There's a lot of external stuff. Today, you and I were talking, this is the 8th public event that I'm doing this week since last Tuesday, including an earnings report and CNBC and a bunch of things. So there's a lot of external stuff that you do, but it's a privilege. Look, it's a privilege to be in a position to come and talk to you guys. So I don't take that for granted at all. I like doing that. I think it's really great, and yeah, it's demanding, but you got to do it, and you got to get yourself out of bed. No day is typical. I mean, but I would tell you that it's increasingly spending time with people and trying to stretch people than working on deals or projects or anything like that. It's more, it's really defining the narrative. I find that sometimes a 5-minute break and an insight you get from just sitting there quietly thinking about something is better than 4 weeks of running around. I've recently actually started doing some meditation in the afternoon. Maybe I should try medication. Maybe I should try medication. That would work better. But in the afternoon, and I found it really hard to do, really hard to do for the first couple of weeks. But it is amazing. I mean, it gives you such tremendous insights. So there are things you can do to slow down the time so you can actually think about what you're doing. Too many of us are tied to these things and don't have enough time to think, and we're reacting to the world happening to us. And I just almost sometimes wish for a slower world where you can think on your own, because that's when the good insights come from.
Thank you, Hamid John. There are a lot of questions about what would be your advice to your younger self if you could meet him again when he has just graduated from Stanford. And I think we have a lot of students and recent graduates in the audience. Some are thinking about starting their own company or joining another startup, or really looking at you and all the achievements. Where shall they start? So what is your advice to your younger self and our younger audience?
Yeah, I would have taken more risk. I mean, people think that I took a lot of risk in the career because I basically started our business 2.5 years out of getting out of school. And that was pretty risky. I mean, we literally started the company with a $50,000 loan from Crocker Bank, and we had no I mean, those days, if you were an entrepreneur, there was no VC or, you get paid and you get all this stuff and all that. You literally had to go figure out the money and start the business. So took plenty of risk, but I would have taken more risk earlier. I think that is really important. Secondly, I would have been less fearful of failure. Failing fast is actually pretty good. Failing fast means, letting a bunch of experiments run, seeing what works. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You just move on. I think that insight has become better known now, particularly in the tech sector, but it took me a while to figure that out.
There are questions about our Iranian community. You mentioned that we are not that good in teamwork, and there are questions around how can we solve it if it is so deeply rooted in our culture. And there are also questions around what are those specific areas that we should contribute, like if we want to start an initiative and like something practical that we can walk out of the door today and start being more engaged and give to the society. What would be your suggestion?
Well, let me respond to the first part of your question, which is what are the patterns that I think if we did more of or less of, we would be a more successful community. I think if we did one thing, it would make a huge difference, and that is when we're part of a group or a team, check our ego at the door and put our self-interest at the door. By the way, if someone is not prepared to do that, it's okay. It's totally okay. Just don't try to be part of that group, and because you'll poison the well. So, but if you decide to be part of a group, your responsibility is no longer to yourself, it's to the group. We in our business, we're a public company and all that, but we run a series of funds. Actually, we run 8 funds that have $30 billion of assets in them, and some of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds and all that are investors of ours. For example, we have two relationships with the Norwegian Oil Fund, which is a $1 trillion investment, and I think we are actually their largest single manager. In these relationships, when we have multiple investors in funds, this is an analogy to this Iranian situation. Most fund documents say that if someone is on the advisory board of the fund, their fiduciary responsibility is to their own fund. Our funds don't say that. If you want to be on the advisory committee of the fund, your fiduciary responsibility is to all investors in the fund. Because you have a fiduciary responsibility. I mean,
you set the goals from the beginning. Yeah.
So if you don't want to invest in our fund, that's okay. There are plenty of other funds, but these are the rules. I think if we apply an analogous rule to how we engage as part of a team, I think we would make a lot more progress. Mm-hmm. And so now the specific causes that we can get involved in, I think, without getting too political about this, I think we're being given a lot of opportunities at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. There's no shortage of causes to get involved with. You're right. Every day you wake up, and you open up Twitter, there are plenty of opportunities. So, by the way, I used to be a Republican. I am still a Republican, but so I think there's a lot of issues that we can take an active voice about. And by the way, whining is not going to help. I mean, I think we should take specific steps in terms of dealing with that. There are lots of organizations that are out there. We don't have to start something new. Let's go find some of the organizations that already are focused on some of these issues and try to support what they're doing. I have my favorite, but there are others as well. The funny thing about the Iranian American community is that because we are all kind of chiefs and not a lot of Indians, we have more organizations out there than we have capacity to support and sustain. So I'm a big believer, let's not go start the 26th Iranian Studies program. Let's try to have like 4 good ones or something, okay? Now, or let's not start the 25th political lobbying organization in Washington. Let's take the one of the 2 or 3 that's active out there, whichever one we prefer. They have slightly different directions. But let's try to be more supportive of each other. We don't have to always do our own thing.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, because usually we hear here that, okay, like go start, but sometimes doing the right thing is joining the efforts that have already been started.
I'm telling you, the resources of our community are not big enough to support as many causes as there are out there. I know that for a fact. So
can you share some of your favorites with us?
I probably shouldn't, because I don't want to, it's pretty obvious which ones I've been supporting over time and all that, but if I do, then I'm promoting something that I'm interested in, and that's probably not appropriate.
No problem. We'll ask you in the break.
I support everything Zora does.
That's good to know.
She's Michael Jordan of doing this kind of work.
Definitely. So more questions. One question is that about critical and crucial conversations in business. What is your advice to have those conversations?
Start with the bad news first. Don't beat around the bush, and be very authentic about the way you treat people. Because you want to be treated the way that you would want. Treat people the way you would want to be treated if the shoe was on the other foot. Mm-hmm. The worst thing you can do to somebody is to tell them horseshit, and when you really have something else in mind. And I think that is disrespectful of the other side.
Mm-hmm. Being honest and authentic with them. There's a question, what is the key to success in your view? It's a very general question, I know, but when you look back, what do you associate your success with today?
I think there's some combination of the following 4 or 5 things. I think you got to be hyper-focused. You can't be. There are people. I don't know how Elon Musk does it. He must be a Superman, but he does 26 things well. But you got to be focused. I think in order to be successful in a competitive environment, you really have to have a very focused strategy, product, business or whatever, and you got to do it on a world-class level because the competition is just brutal. So I think focus is really important. I think hard work is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. And whenever I see somebody who's had a lot of success in the business over a very quick period of time, the inclination is say, oh, they were just totally lucky and all that. But once you get into it and you really learn about people's businesses, there is no easy business. Every business is really hard and probably takes more effort than you imagine. People underestimate what it takes to be an entrepreneur because I think you only hear about the success stories and you don't hear about all the other stories that didn't work out. So there's a tendency to underestimate the effort. So focus, effort. I think it takes intense organization. You would be surprised how many people, opportunity comes knocking at everyone's door more or less. I'm not saying exactly equally, but sometimes you got to be home and answer the door when somebody's knocking on it. And a lot of people don't have the organization and the follow through to do it. I also think, by the way, that when things are really tough, that last 10% of effort usually sort of separates, the real successful people from the also-rans. And I also think you gotta have good luck. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who have all the other conditions and just have not had quite the same break. So I'm the last person to sit here and tell you that it's all effort and brilliance and all that kind of stuff. It could have easily. I can think of 10 situations where we're at the fork in the road in terms of making a decision or a situation, and it could have gone against us, and it would have had some serious consequences. So,
thanks so much, Hamid. We're out of time now, but any closing remarks, any final thoughts you want to share with the audience, especially this audience, and how after today's event is finished, what is next for us, and any advice to follow on?
Look, I think that, there was a time that the Iranian organizations on campus were a little more active. I noticed that in the last couple of years there was maybe a lull. Seems like this is a good restart of what you guys are trying to do. I think it's great. I think you should open it up to more people. And you talked to John. John was here. I'm really sorry I missed his talk. I can't wait to hear it. First of all, he's an amazing leader. He was the university president when I was on the board for 10 years. And by the way, his partner, John Etchemendy, is a world-class guy too. Stanford was probably the best led university during that period of time. And by the way, I think MTL is the new president is also really great. But John, I know, and he had a passion for Iranians, and he had a lot of Iranian students. He knows Iranians really well. He's in a great position. Look, this is a great university. This is a start. We should do this in other places. We should play nice with the other universities that are trying to do all this kind of stuff. But we can leverage off of the excellence that exists at Stanford, and with the core of this group and many others that are outside that are not part of this thing. Let's try to do a couple of things, whether it's this event or whether it's the Nowruz event that you guys used to do at some point in the past or whatever. Let's put our marks on the calendar, pick a few shots, 2 or 3, not everything. Let's not have the theory of the world. Let's have some very limited objectives. But let's build our brand around that, a step at a time. And consistency and being around matters a lot. And I think we can really move the needle on the community. And it starts in centers of excellence. It starts in places like this. And I think we can play a very, very significant role. I mean, not because we're involved in it, but again, because of actually both of those two guys. I mean, look at the rock stars sitting over there. I mean, Mehran is a legend in this place. There's not. I mean, I don't know. 90% of the kids going through Stanford, other than mine, take your course or something. I mean, there is a lot of fantastic things happening over here, and I'm really glad that you guys are getting re-energized and getting after this. So I hope you'll continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. And
Thank you.